Welcome to the Resilience Roundtable Talk. I am Jay Rich, and I have Christina as my co-host today. And we're going to be touching on topics such as domestic violence. So, you want to take the lead with this one?
Sure. Hi, my name is Christina Smith. I am a classical and opera singer. I'm also an advocate against domestic violence, and that's me. I guess my first question for you is, how do you define domestic violence? I think there's so many different ways of looking at it, and there are a lot of misconceptions about what it looks like and who's affected.
Exactly.
So in your experience, how do you define domestic violence?
I define domestic violence as it comes in a lot of shapes and forms. Anybody could be in a domestic violence situation, such as family, friends, relationships, teachers, schools. There's a lot of different forms of it, and it comes from either the mental side, the emotional side, or the physical side. For me, I've been through all the aspects of it, but mainly in relationships in the past, I want to say 10 years. But yeah, that's my take on it. What about you? What's your take on it?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned after doing a lot of research this year is that domestic violence has no profile.
Right.
It has no specific demographic
Exactly.
that is targeted. There are stats that say certain groups are more likely
Right.
to experience it, but the reality is
Everyone.
rich people are going to go through it, women are going to go through it, men are going to go through it. And so I think also knowing what it looks like, whether it's in the home, whether it's in an intimate partner environment,
Right.
knowing that it's not just the bruises. Sometimes it's the scars that get left behind mentally, psychologically,
Right.
emotionally that can do the most damage.
Definitely. Yeah, no, the aftermath of it is definitely the worst part about it. And a lot of people, I feel like they don't have the right resources. They don't know where to go for the help. Sometimes people compress it and keep it bottled up, and then they end up crashing out and going crazy. And I find nowadays, with people that are suffering in these situations, they always go back to their attacker. They always stay. They never find a way to get away from it. And for me, being in those situations and knowing that you hear like people on the outside, like, just walk away, like you could walk away from this. It's not that cut and dry. And until you're physically put in that predicament with a narcissist, in a domestic violence situation, anything that revolves around DV on a whole, it's the attacker is going to always come back. They're going to always find you. They're going to always harass you and stalk you. And if they're not going to harass and stalk you, they're going to start harassing and stalking your people, your work, things that you've built. And I really hate that. Like, I wish there was like this word never existed, you know? Like, it's sad to see people go through it. It's sad that I went through it. So I guess that's like the main reason why we're here today, to really like break the stigma, be a voice for people, help people find their way out of these situations, and learning to walk away and understanding like there's light at the end of the tunnel versus sitting there and being beaten up or abused verbally, mentally, physically, emotionally, when there's someone better out there for you, or maybe you're just that better person for you, that you need to really just lock in with yourself and love you versus trying to love somebody else that doesn't even love themselves, you know?
I think you're right that there's always going to be purpose after the pain.
Right.
And what it looks like for different people is always going to differ. What I've also learned is that domestic violence and the abusers, usually they thrive on a lack of boundaries.
Big time.
And if you do have boundaries, a lot of their goal is to deteriorate those. Right. So whether it's a physical boundary, whether it is an emotional boundary, a lot of what they kind of do is say, okay, your boundaries are not valid.
Exactly.
Right.
There's no, they don't care. It's them or nothing.
Exactly.
And that's wild to me, you know?
So Jay, what are some of the emotional and psychological effects of domestic violence that people kind of ignore or they overlook it?
When someone comes out of a domestic situation, I find that there's a lot of traits of suicide, the mental instability of it, the lack of eating, the depression, the anxiety, the stress, the not wanting to go to work, the not wanting to be seen, and changing their appearance is really big one. And I feel like in today's society, from things I've seen, there's a lot of people who seek revenge. The victim would either try to seek revenge or they could, on a whole, just walk away, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like all those things are overlooked, and people often do not check on their people once they know that they're out of a situation like that. It's like they ignore it, and they're only present when this person is admitted in the hospital or
at the funeral.
That too. Or they're just doing some wild shit in this world, like where it's like they feel like they got to step up and be that person for them. But it's like, where were you at the beginning stages when all this could have been prevented, you know? So to me, I feel like that stuff should never be overlooked, especially if it's your son, your daughter, or just a close friend. I feel like people need to really be more supportive in that aspect to avoid these after effects on people.
Yeah.
So
you said something about one of the warning signs being that that person starts to seek revenge and starts to act out.
Right.
And I think that's really important in a very different way because a lot of abusers actually were victims themselves. And the research does show that.
Yeah.
And so it kind of creates a very complex way of looking at abuse because hurt people do hurt people.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like if someone has not done the work to heal from their trauma,
Exactly.
they're actually very likely to perpetrate it on someone else.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I spoke about in the other episode, trauma bonding. And I find that a lot of abusers tend to trauma dump on people, and it becomes a thing where it's like you're now trapped. Like, how do you get out of this? Now this person is letting me relive my trauma that I overcame because they're dumping their trauma on me, and they're projecting things that I confided in them in and telling me what I've been through when I'm just trying to be that person for you, you know? So that's the worst part also that comes with it, the trauma dumping. And for me, society right now is like, I feel like it's in shambles in relationships in the younger generation. There's a lot of abuse being reported daily. There's a lot of abuse that's not being reported, and there's a lot of victims suffering from suicide. There's a lot of victims suffering from all these things. So it's like, how could we as a community come together and prevent this and help people? There needs to be things put in place, such as facilities or safe places, safe zones. These hotline numbers, yes, they're available for people, but I feel like a lot of people don't want to use it because it's just a person over the phone. I feel like there needs to be zones, like open places, facilities for people to feel comfortable speaking to somebody probably of their color, that where it's like, for me, I don't want to talk to someone on the phone. If I'm going to talk to someone, a lot of people can't afford therapy. So what's another resource that somebody could use to go sit down and be like, okay, I'm talking to somebody that's been through this, that really lived this life, and I'm comfortable to be vulnerable in front of them and share my experiences and get help. Get help is the biggest thing, right?
Absolutely.
So, but yeah,
I think you're so right on that. And I also think that it's like a chain reaction.
Right.
Like in my opinion, a lot of it, especially in Toronto, in the GTA, in Canada generally, is that we need affordable housing.
Exactly.
Because
100%.
if people can't afford to live peacefully,
Yeah.
they're going to stay in situations that they don't need to be staying in.
Exactly. That's real shit right there.
And if you're thinking about it even deeper, we have governments who've made alcohol a little bit more accessible.
Right.
And apartments that aren't.
Yeah.
So you've got substance abuse. You've got people who can't afford to move out. That's a recipe.
Exactly.
That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Right. So it starts, I do believe that it starts at the top, and there's got to be systems, like you said, in place that support people so that they're not having to stay in situations that they don't need to. Yeah.
Facts. That's solid right there. What are red flags and early warning signs in a domestic violence situation?
Oof. I would say it depends on the situation. I think if you're looking at an intimate partner relationship, look at things like love bombing. Look at how they respond to difficult situations.
Right.
I was in a relationship where that person would kind of throw things at the wall and like
temper tantrums.
Complete temper tantrums, like uncontrollable, just red.
Right.
And I didn't look at that as a warning sign. I was like, oh, this is circumstantial. It's just because of this. And it's like, no, look at the behavior.
Right.
That is not about you, because that then gets turned inward.
Right.
It does affect the way that they treat you. And if you also condone it, if you tolerate it, you've set a precedent.
Exactly.
For it to continue. So I would say definitely look at the warning signs, like what are the relationships like with their family members?
Right. That's a big one.
That's a huge one.
You're taking all the words out of my mouth. That's a big one.
But yeah, it's like you have to look at that, because charity begins at home, and so does violence.
Exactly. So you said that you were in a situation, a DV situation. Mm-hmm. How did that mold you as a person today? What did you learn from that experience?
I learned a lot. I would say that someone who is abusive, it's almost never about you.
Right.
And while nobody's perfect, nobody deserves to feel less than someone else in a relationship. You should never feel inferior. No one should ever make you feel like you aren't the person that you are.
Right.
And I think also having your support system around is so important. That's another red flag, is if that person is kind of isolating you from your support system.
That's one thing that I learned when I started studying about narcissistic traits. That's one of the biggest things that they do. They will isolate you from your family, your friends, and even sometimes like move you to, or want you to move to a different place that is not normal for you, a different country, different state. And it's you and them, nobody else. You get on the phone with somebody, they don't like that. Automatic jealousy, and their demeanor changes. So that's funny that you said that. That was a really good point. But
it's true, because that's the thing, is like it thrives when nobody knows what's happening.
Exactly.
Right. So isolation, but like do not for any reason get rid of your support system, because I'm just going to repeat that because I totally botched that. Do not for any reason give up your support system, because they are the ones who were there for you before.
Exactly.
And they're going to be there for you after.
Yep.
So that's what I would say.
Right. I learned that in my situation as well. It was so toxic. It drained me. Like, I wrote a book called Fell in Love with a Narcissist that comes out this year, right? It was supposed to come out last year, but I wanted to tweak some stuff in it. I wanted to add a little bit more accountability in it. And where my accountability comes from is not walking away sooner and being an enabler for the abuse and the behavior, and ignoring all the red flags on a whole. So what I took from that whole situation was peace of mind. And when I kept replaying peace of mind in my head, it turned into the Peace of Mind Foundation, which became a non-for-profit organization to be a voice, to advocate for people that are suffering through all these things. When I realized how much I lost in that situation, friends, relationships with like family, and just losing myself, like work relationships and everything, like my whole being, it shifted a lot in me to realize, like, start this project, release this documentary, and prove to yourself and not prove to other people that, again, there's light at the end of the tunnel. And it was so hard for me to realize that there was light at the end of the tunnel because I was so consumed in this relationship, and I was so consumed on taking the abuse verbally, physically, emotionally. It just became a thing where I sat in it. And while my family supported me, I never pushed them away. I never pushed my support system away. But what I did was I ignored all the walkaways, the you're better than that, like you're worth, know your worth, you know? The encouragement. And for me to have experienced DV in 2015, and this situation that I'm speaking about right now was 2021 to 2023. For me to had experienced that in 2015 and lost my whole being then, to put myself back in a situation when the red flags were there at the beginning, it was definitely a huge learning experience. But it also led me to find myself more than I ever did, right? So this person made me relive my childhood trauma. They've made me relive a lot of dark moments in my life. And that's where the documentary formed from. Because if it's so easy for people in society to throw things at you and hurt you and try to break you down as a person, I said, why not? Why not put it in a project where people can learn from or just resonate, where something could resonate with people? So when I started the first show, the Peace of Mind tour, I had big dreams and high hopes. I'm like, I can put all my music, I can put all my feelings on stage in front of people that are suffering that are suicidal, that are suffering through domestic violence, anxiety, depression, any type of hurt or pain that people have been through. Let me endure it and be that voice with you and cry with you and help you, you know, because of all my experiences. So,
and can I say that's so brave?
Super brave. Thank you. It was really hard to do that. And I'm a very private person. I subliminally put things in my music. And for me to be on stage and doing all of that, especially walking away from this hurt, because it literally was like a month after I closed the door completely, shifted, and I called everybody up and I'm like, I'm ready. Like, I'm ready to get back to work. And I wasn't working. I wasn't doing nothing with this person. I was just being a fucking punching bag. And when I started like working and filming and getting back in the studio and releasing these projects, I'm like, wow, like I really did, like I'm a powerful individual. And I know I'm super talented. And had lost my foster kids because of me bringing people into my life. And I've realized when I bring people into my life, God sends the same person in different bodies. And I never really believed in God until a crazy life experience, which we'll touch on another episode. Something that happened in October of last year. One of the worst experiences ever personally, versus like nothing to do with a relationship, but something that someone put me through. And there's so much points, which is why I'm super excited to talk to you about all of this, because when the spinoff keeps spinning and I keep making these points on this story, everything's going to make sense, right? So I feel like for me talking about domestic violence, I feel like me talking about narcissistic abuse, all these things that I've been through, my goal ideally at the end of the day is to heal people and to spread awareness, to talk about everything that I've been through on a whole and be vulnerable for once, you know? Yeah. I feel like people have this narrative in society because it's either somebody running with something they heard about me or some made up stories, and they pin it all on me. That becomes who I am. That's my reflection in society, but I never speak up. So with me being up here and being able to speak up, I'm ready to stop running. And me and Rochelle were talking about this, and she said to me, she said, I'm not a victim. She said, I'm a survivor. And I've lived my life as a victim for so long, and realizing that like I survived all these things, these like dark forces. It's like, damn, like I'm really standing up here being a voice for people to change that narrative, you know? And that's another thing I want people to really like understand, like stop victimizing yourself. You've survived these situations and you're gonna keep surviving.
If anything.
Exactly. So all of that like made me become more in tune with God and with myself and praying more. And I feel like this year is like my testimony. Like, you know, I'm walking into my testimony. And yeah, I'm super, super grateful that I overcame these things, but I am going to talk on them in depth. I am going to not continue letting these people get away with these actions, you know? Because there's 3 individuals, and to me, I feel like they all got away with it. And I'm the one who had to suffer from it, you know? I can't speak on what anybody else goes through mentally or what they hide, but I'm not hiding it anymore, because why would I hide it when there's so much people suffering in silence, you know?
And that's what is funny enough, that's actually how they don't win.
Exactly.
Because if you stay down, then they've achieved what they wanted to achieve.
Right.
But I think that it's so honorable, and like I said, it's very brave of you to be vocal about not only your experience, but what so many people will never be able to talk about. And I think it's also very important, especially as a man, as a young man, as a Black man,
Right.
that you can be able to voice what you've gone through. Because I think a lot of times we expect men to just keep it in.
Right.
And that's what perpetuates the same cycle.
And it's damaging. It's damaging to the mind and the soul, because they result to smoking, substance abuse, being angry, taking it out on the wrong people, you know? And it's not to say you have to talk about it on your platform or go public with it, but at least find something to cope with, like, you know, like some type of coping mechanisms. Find a therapist or somebody that you could talk to. It may not be a therapist, because again, it's exactly, or put it into some projects, you know. That's my take on that. I just want people to get the help that they need and stop using their hurts and their trauma on other people. Stop putting it on everybody else.
And I think that's what music does.
Right.
100%. Because I think when I had come to terms with even my own experience, I put it in the music right away.
Right.
And I remember going to South Africa in August, September.
How was that?
that was an incredible experience.
I can imagine.
Like, it changed my life. It changed my outlook on life and what freedom looks like.
Right.
And the kids there, they were just so passionate about speaking up about gender-based violence.
Really?
And South Africa has one of the highest amounts of gender-based crimes in the world. And they were just so, I remember seeing this thing called Crying Out Loud and how they would create an impromptu drama skit and just cry.
Really?
And these were 16-year-old kids and they would just cry.
I have to go there one day.
Please, please. I tell everybody.
That's beautiful.
And they just were, and I think he was like a chief of the community.
Mm-hmm.
He had put this together because he realized that art and music have the power to heal.
It does.
Things that we can't always put into words.
Right.
And so after I came back, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to be a voice. I have to be a voice for this because
that's a huge learning experience.
From 16-year-olds.
Right.
I was like, they get it.
Right.
Why are we in Canada and we don't get it? There's no excuse.
There's no excuse. I feel like that comes from the society that they're in, right? Mm. They have nothing else to really like lock into other than their soul, you know, like their mental. So I feel like Canada is so fixated on materialistic things and bullshit.
And well, 100%. And I think also, I think a North American way of looking at things is that we like pretty things.
Exactly.
We like topics that look pretty or sound pretty. In South Africa, they're so comfortable with the ugly and the truth behind things.
Exactly.
They're so comfortable with it that having those kind of conversations is doable now.
Right.
Which I think we could learn something from them, that life is not always pretty.
Exactly.
Art doesn't have to be pretty all the time. It can just be real.
It could be what you want it to be.
That's it.
Right. I like that. I definitely have to go there. You got to definitely give me the details.
I will do that.
or shoot, we might have to plan a trip and go together. So
actually, that'd be awesome.
That'd be fire.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I like that. So how can friends and family identify somebody that's experiencing abuse?
I think, well, we touched on like the warning signs.
Right.
But if family and friends actually know it to be true, I think one of the biggest things that you can do is just respect that person's boundaries. If they say they can't answer the phone, don't push. If they say they don't want to talk about it, don't push. Because I think that's what differentiates your support system from your abuser. Your abuser does not know boundaries.
Exactly.
Your family and your friends should.
Right.
So I think it's really about honoring what it is that they need when they need it and when they tell you they need it.
But what if they don't tell you they need it? And, you know, this person that is healing from this abuse is potentially suicidal, or, you know, they struggle with depression and anxiety. How do you ignore that because they're telling you they don't want to speak at the moment, or they don't like just give them time and space? What if that space leads them to doing something destructive?
Yeah, that's a really good point too. I think if you know that person is in any kind of physical danger, whether it's to themselves or by the hands of someone else, yes, you absolutely should get involved.
Right.
Call the cops if you need to. They may not like that in the moment, but it is going to save their life.
Exactly. Right.
And sometimes just being there.
Just being there,
just
for sure.
Being there and not judging them, not telling them that they should leave and they should do this and they should do that. Like, just saying, you know what, whatever you choose to do, I'm here.
Exactly.
And I care about you.
That's all they need to hear.
Yeah, that was what I needed to hear.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think it's just about just being present.
Right. People don't hear it often. People need to tell their peers how they're loved and how special they are, and that they're worth it, you know?
And they matter.
Exactly.
How do you think that speaking about domestic violence allows the survivor to regain control of their life?
Well, I feel like that question is targeted for me in a way, because I do speak out about it. So from my experience, I feel like speaking about it in music and my projects and speaking about it publicly for people to resonate with, um, it makes me feel like unstoppable. It makes me feel powerful because I didn't have a voice when I was in these situations. I wasn't able to speak about it. I wasn't able to tell the person or anybody on a whole how I felt because I felt like I'd be judged or clowned, you know? So talking about it and really telling my truth and my experience is like, it just feels powerful. It feels like nothing is in my way, you know? Because imagine me trying to talk about this while being in a domestic violence situation with somebody. It's never going to happen, especially publicly.
And also,
they would never allow it.
For your safety too.
That too. So now it's like, I'm not afraid. So it gives me that strength and that ability, especially to hear people that watch these podcasts and see my projects and hear my music and tell me how much it resonated and telling me their experience. And I've been getting a lot of messages lately with people.
I was going to ask you that actually.
Yeah, like people are like, sometimes we feel like I'm a therapist because like they be coming to me like wanting advice or just feeling comfortable. Like it's a safe space to tell me what they went through. And there was this one individual who hit me up and they let me know like, hey, I'm in the hospital. Like, can you talk? And I guess their situation is kind of unique. Their person, I guess, ran off with somebody else in the sunset. And when what I felt in that situation when they told me they were in the hospital was the immediate like, I'm proud of you. Because clearly you knew where to go. Clearly someone found you. Clearly you are where you're supposed to be because of what you're feeling. And it broke my heart because it's like, damn, like nobody understands the triggers of being in love with somebody. Nobody understands the mental tricks that it plays on you where you feel like taking your life is like maybe the only option or self-harm, cutting yourself or maybe just swallowing pills saying fuck it. And I feel like people misconstrue when someone wants to take their life from being in a relationship. It's not so much because the person left you. I think it's more so because the aftermath, the effects, the demons in your head. Knowing that this person, like you gave them your all and you stopped your life for them, or there's so many scenarios. And to know that someone could just like, someone you built a life with, just up and leave you and walk out of your life like that. It's like, you think of yourself as like worthless. Like,
well, I was going to add to that and say like a lot of times we tie our own self-worth to other people.
Exactly.
And it's very easy to do that in a relationship.
It is. It's not something that I think people cannot do. I think it's something that is just a thing that happens when you're in love with somebody. And there's probably a few people that are strong-minded that don't do that, right? So for me to know like people are coming to me with these topics and things they've been through, and there was another person, they set up some cameras in their house and they showed me the videos of their person abusing them, and it's always what should I do? How do I leave the situation, right? And for me, it's hard for me to speak on how someone should leave a situation because I never left my situation. And I kept going back knowing what the consequences were. And it's something that I feel like people need to self-reflect on and have a strategic plan. For me, I moved far the fuck away.
Where'd you move to?
LA, but LA is far from here, right? It was either Dubai or LA, but Dubai is not an easy place to just up and move to. But I was so what were the words? I was so ready to just go. I didn't care where, as long as it was far. And I changed my number. I did the no contact. I did all that. And when I realized my life was so much more peaceful and how better off I was, I did it. So all I could do is tell people that experience versus telling them what to do for their self, right? Because they're not gonna do it. You got to do what your heart is telling you. And if your heart's telling you to stay, it's not your time to leave that situation. And for me, I feel like maybe I should study psychology. I feel like maybe I should be a therapist, because when I talk to these people, it actually feels good. Like, I've been here, but I survived it, right? So
I have a question for you. So you had taken some time and you went to LA. Some people would consider that running.
Right.
Where was the line between creating space and distance and running from the problem?
Wow. So I wouldn't say in that situation I ran. I chose me. So that's where I created the space and the boundaries, where I realized that I was pouring too much in their cup and mine was empty at that point. And it was time for me. It was just the time expired. As much as I felt like I was running mentally, at the time, maybe I was in my head like, you're running, just face this. But today, when I talk about it, I did face it. I faced it and I left. I got up and got out of there. And if I didn't, I probably would have had damages to my face. I probably would have lost a lot more. I probably wouldn't be here today. And I spoke about it in my documentary, you know. In one of my and on the Fell in Love with a Narcissist album, My Last Message to You, I spoke about that whole experience. And for me to had found the ability to get up and leave, till today, I will always admire that, because a lot of people don't. And it was a lot of damage control, you know. So I found this message in my phone when I had went to LA, and I pretty much was like, this is recent when I found it. I was clearing up my phone, and it was from my ex at the time. And when I was in LA, I was getting like a ton of messages, like, forgive me, the love bombing, all that stuff, right? And I'm glad I stood my ground, because typically I wouldn't. And this person said to me, you didn't deserve to be treated like that. I got caught up, and I told you, I broke you trying to find myself. I apologize again. I was wrong and I love you. I shouldn't have treated you that way. It wasn't always my fault, but most of the time it was. I'm sorry. I'll leave you alone. I won't bother you. I won't bother your healing process. I'll love you forever. Hopefully one day I can at least be good friends with you. We've been through too much. So it's like, when I read that, it's like, I find that whole message very narcissistic, because how are you taking accountability but still not trying to take accountability, you know?
But that's kind of what a narcissist does, right?
Exactly. Because to me, it was never my fault. If I had faults, the only faults that I had in that situation was my reaction to their actions. And not walking away fast enough, like I said, right?
Right.
So it's kind of crazy to say, like, I guess it's safe to say that I stayed in something too long, where maybe it damaged me more than it should have. Because in my other episode, I spoke about, which was hard for me to talk about, that I struggled through depression and anxiety, right? And a lot of that came from this last situation. So for me to be up here and really, like, get more in depth because the documentary was very like mysterious, like who, what, like, and I want more details, right? So I'm glad that like I could actually put some insight on it because a lot of people don't know my story of what happened. A lot of people hear that I was the problem, I was the crazy one, and I realized as a kid and everything I've been through, it was always a thing and a habit of mine to keep receipts, to keep screenshots, to keep things of everything, you know?
Yeah.
Because no one's ever going to make me look crazy. Like I have a whole list of everything, you know? And one day I'll
stay ready.
One day I'll start talking about it because it's like you're never going to bring something up from a long time ago and then hit me with it. And I have nothing to prove, you know?
Right.
Even though you don't got to prove nothing to nobody, but when you're a public figure or influencer, it's like you do want to protect your image, you know, and especially being a foster parent with people putting narratives out there, which we'll touch on later. You want to save your name and reputation, so you kind of do have to prove yourself to people because it messes up people that you work with and what it messes up with relationships that you're building with people to work with, right? So that's why I feel like there's a lot of things that I have to prove, not per se to people, but more so for myself in a way, you know?
So I'm curious, what exactly happened in 2015?
That whole situation, for me to be so young and misguided, till this day, like nobody ever asked me how did that affect me? Like, do I still struggle from it, you know? Like,
and do you?
I do. Like it really traumatized me, you know? It traumatized me on a whole. And I don't know like if I'll ever let it go mentally because I didn't deserve that. I didn't deserve to be put in that predicament. And the picture that I'm about to show, I never really showed anybody before. But this is what happened to me in 2015. And then I guess we kind of like cut it right there.
Okay. That's okay. Take your time. Yep.